take us through the key developments included in the new version, I'd like you to please welcome to the stage the FORS QA team, consisting of, come on, don't be shy, come on, let's give them a round of applause. Neria, Charlie and Bal. So, over to you, Neria.
Okay, thank you. During the presentation, our team, Baljit, Charlie, and myself will take you through some of the key changes with version 7 as it comes into effect on the 2nd of January. We will also follow up Glenn's presentation and provide with more insight into the FORS audit platform. But before we do so, we want to highlight the huge amount of work that has gone into the release and implementation of new version of the standard from all the key stakeholders, with the focus being from an operator's perspective by only making changes to the standard that were needed. Aligning the requirements of the standard with the vehicle roadworthiness legislation is to provide our operators with reassurance that you are compliant and the risk of potential operational downtime when dealing with enforcement authorities or dealing with consequences that can be serious and sometimes catastrophic can be significantly reduced, if not eliminated. We also heard from a number of experts speaking today that decarbonization and emissions reporting is soon to be regarded as important as financial reporting, with the requirements cascading through the supply and distribution chains. Some of you might already have experienced requests from your customers or intenders. Therefore, the FORS standard version 7 is to equip you with all the knowledge, tools, and data outputs to fulfill your own reporting needs and customer requests. That's why we are developing FORS emissions calculator, which will be freely available to all FORS operators to use as part of your subscription, irrespective of the level of accreditation that you are at. We also understand that the term well-to-wheel emissions sounds a bit scary. However, the formulas within the FORS emission calculator will work out all the work in the background for you, depending on the operational input that you will be inputting. You will be able to access the calculator on the FORS dashboard. The tool is very easy to use. Once you have populated your fleet profile and vehicle details, there are 3 simple reporting steps to follow. First of all, select the reporting period that you want to report your emissions for. Then enter data, including fuel type and quantities used per vehicle type. And finally, simply view your emissions data with all the calculations having been done for you in the background. All reports will be saved automatically on the tool. You can download these at any time, share with your customers, suppliers, use internally, or when evidencing data requirements for FORS Silver. I will now pass the stage to Baljit, and she will take us through the version 7 changes for Bronze and Silver.
Good afternoon, all. I will begin to talk about the Bronze changes, and I will start with the management section. So we'll start at M4 for staff resources. So as part of the pre-employment checks for drivers, it is required to have a declaration of any collisions at work that have had engagement with an insurance company or the police. To demonstrate this, it may be included in either a revised pre-employment checklist or an updated recruitment and selection policy. The driver declarations in requirements M5, D1, D2, and D6 are now all required annually. Moving on to the vehicle section, we'll start at V1. So there are 3 key changes here. Firstly, a procedure must be in place on vehicle safety recalls with evidence being provided of notifications being checked, rectified, and kept on file. Vehicle inspections and maintenance must align with the operator licence and meet the requirements of the DVSA Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. This means for HGV and PCV operations, auditors will be looking at evidence such as brake performance assessments being completed at these safety inspections. And also, the vehicle operator licence system will also be cross-referenced to verify relevant operator licence undertakings on vehicle maintenance. Evidence of the technical competency of staff conducting safety inspections is also required. For example, records of technical qualifications and accreditations, or assessment on the maintenance provider to ensure third-party suppliers meet the required standard. We'll move on to V7 for tyre management. So tyre management requirements now align to the DVSA guidance. And a couple of examples are the wheel retorque to be completed following wheel refitting and the records being retained on file. Tyre reports to be reviewed and retained and the quality of any contracted work to be monitored. We'll now move on to the driver section and we'll begin at D1 for licensing. So the change here is the frequency of driver license checks is now increasing to 3 monthly. This is in line with the Senior Traffic Commissioner's guidance for HGV and PCV operations, but it is just as relevant to light vehicle operations. To allow operators to adjust for reapproval audits in 2025, there is a transitional arrangement in place, which means that only a minor action point will be awarded if the frequency hasn't been met. There may be more guidance published on this prior to the version 7 effective date. Moving on to D4. A key change here is that the 10% tolerance has been removed for the driver learning requirement, with mandatory e-learning now being required to be completed as part of staff induction for any new drivers. A tolerance still may be accepted, but this must be fully justified. Another major change to provide flexibility and variety, you will have the option to undertake either the existing FORS professional e-learning or FORS approved e-learning. This is a new approach to recognising e-learning in the same way we have for FORS approved training. Moving on to the operations section, we'll start at O2 for the fuel consumption and environmental impact. So the policy and supporting procedures need to include the following additional requirements. Calculating and monitor diesel to AdBlue ratio by vehicle registration mark. Eliminating engine idling in accordance with relevant regulations and ensuring that any low carbon fuels which are used are reputably sourced, such as through supplier approved by the ZEMO Renewable Fuel Assurance Scheme. To demonstrate meeting the standard at audit, operators must incorporate these requirements into their documented policies and procedures, and also provide supporting evidence of communications to drivers and transport staff on engine idling laws, promotion of behaviour changes or upgrades in technologies to monitor compliance, and also provide records as evidence that the requirement has been implemented. A transitional arrangement is in place for reapproval audits in 2025. So if the diesel to AdBlue ratio has not yet been calculated, a minor action point will be recorded, providing time to achieve full compliance by the next audit. And finally, at O5, any operator using longer semi-trailers will need to have a specialist operations policy and procedure in place along with formal notification to operate longer semi-trailers. This can be evidenced via the Vehicle Operator Licence system. So that concludes the changes with regards to bronze. I will now talk you through the silver changes. So starting at S2. The S2 requirement has been updated to align with the development of the FORS emissions calculator. As mentioned earlier, the fleet emissions data, greenhouse gas, NOx, and particulate matter is now to be recorded and calculated. So this can be done either by using the FORS emissions calculator or a FORS approved alternative. The way the data is entered into the FORS performance data report is also changing. Now fleet and emissions data will be extracted from the FORS emissions calculator, or if you are using a FORS approved alternative, uploaded via a CSV file. As part of the transitional arrangement for reapproval audits from the 2nd of Jan 25, operators will have to demonstrate that they have started collecting and calculating the data using the FORS emissions calculator or approved alternative. And from the 2nd of Jan 26, 12 months data will need to be provided. Moving on to S3 for environmental impact. This is a new requirement with the key following points. A policy and supporting procedure needs to be in place to plan and implement emissions performance improvements. The nominated fuel and emissions champion needs to complete an additional FORS practitioner module, which is the FP16, the Introduction to Decarbonisation. Finally, a review of the fleet operations is required to assess potential initiatives that could minimise environmental impact and improve efficiency. A few examples of these can include improving load consolidation, first-time delivery performance, using e-cargo bikes to replace van movements, or the use of renewable energy sources. Once you've completed the review, it will help you to identify the key action areas that offer the best combination of cost effectiveness and environmental impact improvements. Finally, you just need to document your findings in the Operational Performance Action Plan. An updated template will be available on the website to guide you should you need this. Moving on to S5, there are a couple of changes that I would just like to highlight here. Firstly, as per Bronze D4, the 10% tolerance has been removed for the driver training and e-learning requirement. However, this doesn't mean that the tolerance has been removed. Now, 10% is quite arbitrary and provides a very different tolerance for an operation of 10 drivers versus an operation of 1,000 drivers. At audit, any outstanding training must be fully justified. Operators will now have a choice to undertake FORS-approved environmental awareness e-learning, as well as the FORS Professional Low City module. The list of the FORS-approved providers will be published, and as part of the approval criteria, records of completed e-learning will be logged automatically on the FORS Professional Training Register. Furthermore, the manager training requirements have also been updated for the Road Risk Champion and also the Fuel and Emissions Champion. For the Fuel and Emissions Champion, as mentioned at S3, an additional mandatory FORS practitioner module 16, which is the Introduction to Decarbonisation, is now required to be undertaken. However, a transitional arrangement for reapproval applications has been put in place and will be accepted in 2025 if the training is booked to be completed within 3 months of the audit submission. And finally, at S10, Fleet transition is again a new requirement. For you to meet the requirement, you need to carry out a fleet review to understand practicalities of transitioning to lower environmental impact vehicles. Operators are required to provide a fleet replacement plan to help prepare for the transition for renewable fuel technology and any regulatory phase-out dates for new petrol and diesel vehicles. The fleet replacement plan needs to include the projected procurement cycles of your fleet, the estimated total cost of ownership of petrol and diesel vehicles, as well as their lower environmental impact alternatives. It also needs to include if any government financial incentives are available and any practical considerations for integrating lower environmental impact vehicles into the fleet. The FORS Fleet Replacement Plan will help you to evidence this new requirement. This concludes the silver changes. I will hand you back to Nevia. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Bal. So, as we have heard today, decarbonization is at the forefront of version 7 of the standard. As you can expect, the most forward-thinking and leading requirements are at gold. Firstly, G3 introduces a new requirement for a decarbonization strategy and replaces the sustainable operations requirement in version 6. Here, a documented decarbonization strategy is required. So what does the strategy document is to include? Firstly, an emissions baseline against which you will set and measure your environmental performance in the years to come. Next, self-defined emissions performance targets for years 2028, 30, 35, and 40, and the actions you plan to take to achieve these targets. These you would have already identified at Silver S3 and S10. Finally, a commitment to ensure the accuracy of environmental performance data gathered. We are working on a FORS template to help you with this requirement, as well as the transitional arrangement has been put in place for reapproval applications in 2025, where performance targets for years 2028, 30, 35, and 40 can be added to the strategy from January 2026, once the emissions baseline has been established. G7, managing fleet transition, is another new requirement. Operators need to further develop the fleet replacement plan, as required at Silver S10, to further include a commitment to procure all new vehicles at ultra-low emission standard. As a minimum, this would include Euro 6 for diesel and hybrid vehicles, Euro 4 and above for petrol vehicles, and zero tailpipe emissions or alternatively fueled vehicles. Next is setting yourselves a target date to achieve 100% ultra-low emission fleet. And finally, setting a target date to begin procuring zero-emission vehicles. However, I would like to stress that the requirement here is to have a plan in place. But plans can change, and you can review these to reflect your operational circumstances, changes, industry developments, and regulatory changes. And FORS template will be available to help you with this requirement. G8, environmental impact engagement, has two key elements. One, having an environmental impact engagement policy and procedure, and two, records to demonstrate your actions taken. That would conclude the gold update, and now Charlie will talk us through the new FORS audit platform.
So as Glenn mentioned this morning, we are introducing a live and dynamic digital auditing platform, and I'm excited to share how this will completely transform the FORS auditing experience. The audit platform not only modernises our approach to auditing, but it also helps ensure efficiency, accuracy, and consistency across the whole auditor community. One of the major changes is the complete rewrite of the bronze audit question set. Not only is the audit more robust against some of the key regulatory compliance issues, but we've also integrated smart logic within the platform that tailors the questioning process based on your responses. So what this means is when you answer specific questions, the platform will trigger additional relevant inquiries. Our goal here is to eliminate the heavy text typically found within your reports, replacing it with concise, factual information. In addition to this, to minimise the need for support and documentation, we've embedded the grading criteria directly within the audit template. This transparency benefits both auditors and operators, ensuring everyone has a clear understanding of what is required. FORS auditors are now going to be able to upload media, work offline and on 3 devices simultaneously. So what does this mean for you as a FORS operator? The audit report will be provided in full and as a summary. The transformed format will provide you with all the information that you need for the longer term, but summarising the key points for the short term. Behind me is an example of the new format that you can expect. While the title page will resemble what you currently receive, it highlights the number of flagged items and actions. The actions identified were listed in the old report at the very bottom, but within the new update, they'll be clearly outlined on the 3rd page. So behind me is an example of how flagged items and required actions will be presented. With the traffic light system, the outcome of each section is highlighted, making it easy to identify where major and minor observations exist. The amber box indicates the pending action that has been created to address the observations identified during the audit. This approach ensures that you will receive clear, actionable insights that must be rectified by the next audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. So, as you have heard from us, we have been busy over the past year. We are contracted to transform the scheme, and that is exactly what we are doing. FORS can only be a success if we have a professional, knowledgeable, and experienced auditing team delivering a quality service, and we do. I'm glad to say that we constantly score over 9 out of 10 in our audit surveys. So I would like to finish our today's presentation by acknowledging all the hard work that is being carried out by our auditors and audit providers. Thank you, and well done.